I know I said I was going to take a few days off. That has changed. And no, Salty has not refiled. What's happened is I ran up against a bit of culture today that I'm kind of struggling with. Now, I told you that culture is the thing, inability to accept culture is the thing that does everybody in here in Costa Rica when they come to move here. That still stands. Okay, so let's talk about this a little bit. Here I am on the day of Prince Philip's funeral, which I was watching live streaming when this went down in Oxford, England. I'm sitting here wearing a dress from Nepal, made in Nepal, here in Costa Rica. So, wearing my glasses from China, my iPhone from China, and God knows where all the stuff from here is, because for the first time, well, maybe not the first time, but for the majority of this modern time, almost everything we deal with is from somewhere else. It's not unusual to have clothing manufactured somewhere like Vietnam or wherever. It's order your glasses from China, all kinds of stuff. So here I am, Suzanne Titkemeyer of No Longer Quivering, about to rant about culture. What happened today? Well, one of those things that was me bumping, slap up against culture while I'm watching the funeral in England of somebody from the greatest generation, the World War II generation that fought that war. An iguana fell out of my starfruit tree, a big iguana, like a 5 foot or 4 or 5 foot. Now it wasn't my big guy. If it was Big Iggy, I would have thrown a fit. He fell out of the tree, which is not uncommon. I've seen iguanas fall out of the trees here. They just lose their grasp, and the next thing you know, boom, down they go. If it's a long fall, they'll be stunned for a few minutes and then toddle off. If it's a short fall, they run off right away. I didn't see the fall, so I can't judge how it was. Here's what I did see. They snatched him up when he was in a stunned state, brought him to us, and was showing us this giant iguana. My husband and I, oh, how cool. I'm taking pictures of him holding the giant iguana, holding it right behind the head and holding the tail. So the tail can't whip around and harm you, and the head can't swivel and bite the crap out of you, because they are very fighty and bitey. If they bite you, the bacteria in their mouth is so unusual and bad that you almost always have to go on antibiotics. That's what I've learned here. That's why I won't go real super close to them, no more than 5 feet. And that's only the ones like Big Iggy that are seem to be like they know us and they're pretty almost tame now. I still wouldn't try to pet one. So they tell me, we're going to make soup. Sopa iguana. So I'm kind of jaw dropped when they said that. They said they make iguana, they make soup, they make frito out of it. They do all these different things. And I'm like, okay, I know that iguanas are eaten here by people, by the Ticos. They eat an iguana. If they can get their hands on a big one, they'll eat him. They were trying to tell me it's the best eating ever. And before I picked my jaw up off the ground, they had borrowed our machete and done what King Henry VIII did to Anne Boleyn. They beheaded him. So that was more of a jaw drop moment for me. Like I said, usually I'm not disturbed by the culture here. That was it for me. I'm going to have a conversation with my husband and them about what I can't accept. I don't mind if they raid the mango tree for mangoes, as long as they're not taking tons of them, if there's some for us. I don't mind that. I genuinely don't mind if they take fruit from the starfruit tree, the banana tree, the various trees. We have way more fruit than we could ever eat, and we end up taking a lot of it to the food bank when it becomes overwhelming. That's what we'll do. I do mind when somebody is beheading iguana on my property. I don't, yeah, like I said, that is my fridge too far this morning, is the beheaded iguana. This is where I hit up against the culture. First of all, they're protected here in Costa Rica. You're not supposed to harm any wild animal. It's actually against the law. Even though I do know that they eat iguanas. I know that during COVID, at the worst of the COVID last year, when we were under um, lockdown and no tourists were allowed, people became so hungry here that they started eating, chasing down and eating as many iguanas as they could get their hands on. And iguanas actually got kind of rare to see along here. We didn't see very many of them. I can see that, okay? And I don't have a problem with that if you're doing it elsewhere. However, on my little slice of heaven, paradise here, I don't want to see anybody beheading an iguana or hauling it away to make soup out of it. So that's my line in the sand with the culture here. It's just too much for me to bear. I know they like it. It doesn't mean that I'm going to approve of them doing it. So now you know, for me, where the line is on my culture and my culture shock here. I can pretty much accept just about anything except for the high rates of spousal abuse towards women here. Some of the patriarchal attitudes of men towards women here are rather hard to live with. I've called out a number of people. I've learned that men will not shake your hand here. They'll shake your husband's hand, but if you go to greet them, it's either a kiss on the hand or a wave, but it's nothing like what we experience in the US. It's very patriarchal here. Most of the time I'm fully insulated from that here and it doesn't bother me, but every now and then I'll run up against it out there past the gates. So I guess I'm going to have to talk to my husband about this and say, hey, this can't happen anymore. If they want to if they capture an iguana and they want to haul it off for soup, I'm not really super happy about that if it's one of the giant ones, because the giant ones have lived some time to get that big and it's rare to see them that big. But I can accept that a whole lot better than killing it right on our property. I shudder to think what they did with the head. I hope they put it in the trash, because if I run across that thing when I'm out there picking up trash in the yard, I'm going to be angry. So we'll see. And here I thought some dumb move of Catherine's or a refiling by Salty would get my attention. Instead, it's a royal funeral and an iguana beheading right in the center of it. I just want to say about Prince Philip's funeral, I watched it live. What can I say? I think that for all his foibles, and he definitely had them, because he's human like everybody else and put his pants on one leg at a time. I think we're watching the passing of the era. So many of the people from the greatest generation, the people who fought the war, they fought World War II and stopped Hitler, those people have passed. They're the people that built a lot of the infrastructure in the US and around the world. They're the ones that picked up the pieces after World War II and rebuilt everything without complaint, with sacrifice. And I'm beginning to think that that's one of the things that my own generation has missed, and the generations after me. We really don't know what it's like to collectively sacrifice. I think the closest that we've come to that in generations since the greatest generation is this COVID thing, with the staying at home, masking, wearing masks to protect each other. That's the closest that any of us have ever gotten to that. I've read so much about in World War II, the different privations that people in the US and around the world had to make, and it was pretty startling. The whole idea of ration books and rationing what you can have is pretty mind-boggling in this get what you want age. And I don't think that's necessarily a good thing. I think that's one of the things that's really harmed our culture is that we always have to have it our way. And here I am bitching about them cutting the head off an iguana. Maybe I should just shut up about that and let them have their iguana and say, Godspeed. They're talking about bringing us iguana soup tomorrow. I'm not eating it. So I was ranting about culture, and our and the passing of the greatest generation in their culture. Philip was 99. He was a young man when World War II started, and was a pilot. My late great father-in-law was a navigator during World War II in the planes. I've heard his stories of what World War II was like, and my mother-in-law's, like I said, this only thing we've had in our so many generations is even remotely like it is the COVID thing. Yet people refuse to stay home. They refuse to wear masks to help everybody else out. And it kind of blows my mind. There are some things in this world that you have to do for the betterment of others. And it's not always fun. It's not always practical. Sometimes you actually have to go out of your way to do this thing to help somebody else out, even if you have no desire to do so. You'd rather do your own thing. Yeah, I admit I came from the do your own thing generation. And now I'm looking back at that and thinking, well, maybe that wasn't the right thing that could have been done. So who knows? Couple of observations about the royal funeral. They sure seated Prince Harry about as far as you could get from the front of the church. He was sitting out in what looked like outer Siberia, as far as now. And I understand the church practiced COVID seating, and they had everybody wearing masks, which was an excellent idea. I think on that regards, it was an excellent idea of what you do to protect everybody else. The seating was staggered. Everybody's wearing a mask. Excellent. So they seated him out in outer Siberia. They put somebody between him and his brother William when they were walking behind the casket. So I was struck by that. I was struck by the fact that he comes from the greatest generation that sacrificed everything. And the fact that this was probably the most low-key royal funeral I've ever seen. And that's not even counting the fact that we're in COVID. Apparently, he did not want to fuss. It was delightful to hear some hymns that I only have heard when I'm in Great Britain, to see how they managed to make this a seamless production that was very dignified. The other thing for me, it personally struck me, is I miss Europe. I miss living in Europe. It's been 30 some odd years since I lived in Europe, and I miss it greatly. I miss the fact that there is older culture that goes way back. I used to routinely, we lived in Fulda and Petersburg area for a while, hike up to a very old church at the top of a hill that had a giant wall mural that had been painted in the 900s, and there were faint traces of it remaining. And it was fascinating for me to be able to see these places that were so ancient, to touch the ancient stone and to think about all the people who had come before me. In the States, there was already some of that in my life because I was raised in, deep South Louisiana even. And parts of New Orleans and the outlying areas are very old. So there's that. I lived in Virginia. I lived in a town that provided Minutemen for the war against Great Britain. So there was also lots of antiquities and old stuff, but I still miss really culture. Here, everything's been thrown up in the last 20 years, it feels like. There's some very old places. There's a church south of us that I've gone to that was built way back, like in the 1700s. But that's it. Everything else is modern, new since the turn of the century. And I'm not sure that's totally a good thing. It's a weird feeling living in a culture where there is no greater, longer history. A very strange thing. And knowing that I'm being part of their future culture that they'll one day have to explain to everybody. So anyway, that's just my little rant this morning. I bet you're shocked that it doesn't involve Miss Catherine Paulson, because it does not. And I'm so happy it doesn't, because I am sick to death of thinking about her, writing about her, talking about her. I just want her to just move along. So she's completely out of here. She's not going to live rent free in my head any longer. I want to think about other things. I want to think about culture. I want to think about how we can improve this world for everyone, not just ourselves, but for everyone. How can we do that? What does that look like? What is that going to take? These sleeves are driving me crazy because of the tingling I've got on my left side. What does that look like? I'm not sure that it's not too late to fix these things that are wrong, but the hopeful part of me thinks that maybe if we take some time to do this, it can happen. I'd like to see an end to racism, not just in the US, but worldwide. I can tell you from having lived in different countries that every country has their ethnic group they dump on. Every country I've ever lived in. In Germany, that was the Turks. And I hear Germans now that I know blaming the Turks for everything wrong in Germany now. Here, it's the Nicaraguans. They blame the Nicos for everything. And that's really unfortunate, because Nicaragua is still stuck back in the agrarian, I'd say late 1800s, early 1900s. It's not unusual when you go there to see guys with horses and horse carts farming. And that's their primary farm equipment. Instead of having a John Deere or whatever, they're using a horse and a plow, or a horse and a farm cart. That's not unusual there. That's very usual. And I'm not saying it's wrong. It's not wrong, but it's part of what holds Nicaragua back in poverty, is the fact that they haven't modernized. So this is a very delicate balance. How do you modernize, and hold on to your time? It's hard. It's a delicate dance, but it's one that is very necessary, I think. Okay, I've talked 17 minutes, which is pretty amazing with my lungs being crazy today again. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and go out and count the iguanas and make sure they didn't haul off too. They did haul off big mangoes, but I'm not too mad about that because I've already hauled off a couple myself. Y'all have a great day.